1,400 of these things.
1401.
And 1,401. And, I'm trying to reflect back over the last 15 years of Freedom Project because it coincides when some of the more over-the-top aspects of education were hijacked. And so, given a lot of talks and traveled a lot, we've had a lot of talks here, a lot of talk about education. And so, this is kind of an interesting talk for me. One thing I've never been able to do in most of my talks is to be a little bit more philosophic. I noticed that you have a couple of months down the road, you're going to have a college conversation about this. That's probably better where I would have been, I think, being a professor for 30 years. Freedom Project gave me an opportunity to really dig into what was going on in the middle and the elementary and the high schools. And so I'm going to start broadly. Usually when I give these talks, it's a lot of information, a lot of evidence, a lot of proof of what's going on in the public schools. But I'm willing to bet that you know that. In fact, you've probably sat through a lot of talks with people talking about what was going on. I've given a lot of them. I'll do some of that, so I will fill some of that in. But thinking about this more philosophically, I think there's two major issues that we have. Since World War II, particularly, education fell almost exclusively into the hands of progressives. And that's what happened up till about 5 or 6 years ago. It was progressive control of education that turned itself into something really, really unfortunate. If you think about education today, the one thing when we ever hear national discussions about education, at least up until Donald Trump took office again, no one's talking about what the kids need, how we are going to prepare them to be individual learners, people who can read and write, do math. When you listen to the teachers' unions, they never mention any of that stuff. When you hear many of our politicians, they don't talk about that stuff. Certainly the people who have run education don't see education about education. So the first and most important thing we have to recognize is that it is one of the biggest businesses in the world, the American education complex. Multi-billion dollar enterprise. A lot of people getting money, a lot of people getting rich, a lot of the teachers' unions. It's a bad sign for American wellness when the largest union in the entire country is an education union, teachers' unions. They're also, not surprisingly, the most radically political union. They make the car unit, the dock builders all seem tame by comparison. With all the money they have, they are virulently political in how they use it. When you hear people like Randy Weingarten talk, it's really stunning how much the left believe that your kids are not your kids. And that was what we got from post-World War I all the way through the Common Core era. But now I think something is much more dangerous that's going to be much more difficult to fight off. And that is the technology. And that's going to be the second part of my talk. We've got to stop. We've got to change path here. Politics are horrible. It's doing horrible things to our kids. And what is the answer to all the talks you've come through all these years? Get your kids out, right? I mean, that's probably as true as it ever was. But I've met a lot of moms and dads who have gotten their kids out and let those kids be babysat with the technology. And so I can tell you what I see as a functioning teacher at the universities, because that's the other thing I will say. One of the successes of the progressives since 1945 up until about 5 years ago was they managed to turn all education into the same education. There's really no difference now about how teachers go about teaching your little kids and your graduate students. It's about ideology, it's about shaping worldviews, it's about creating the next wave of radical change. One of the things about Common Core, that's when I got involved with younger education, because I could see 15 years ago kids were coming to my college classroom and they knew less than they'd ever known before, to the point that they didn't belong in college. And there were so many of them that did not belong in college that we professors, even the ones like me, very rare, that were coming from a Christian and conservative background, we were put in a very difficult situation. If we were to get rid of, to fail, the 50% of kids who can't do the work, then we'd all be out of jobs. We couldn't do it, right? And that begged another thing. If the universities were taking these kids in, and oftentimes, believe it or not, giving them scholarship money and loading them down with student loans, I found this to be a problem. Fail the kids who don't belong there, but then what happens to them? To some degree, I have felt that I'm the only one who was going to try at that level to give them something. I think if you've heard me talk before, you've probably heard many of my anecdotes, and this is one of them. When I started teaching Shakespeare 30 years ago, I would teach 13 plays, and they'd read a play a week, and we move quickly and we talk deeply, because I didn't have to explain to them what a subject and a verb is. I didn't have to take a month and a half to teach them how to read poetry. I mean, poetry's hard, right? Our kids can't read prose. Imagine asking them to read serious poetry. In fact, poetry is really important. Not because you have to care about a 16th century poet or anything like that. It's the calculus of language. I mean, think about it. We used to send our kids to school at kindergarten, and the goal was, by the time they graduated from high school, if they were sharp and they worked hard, they could do calculus, right? Advanced math. That's the ideal. But when you look at it from a language perspective, what do you want your kids to do to be functionally educated? You want them to read as advanced as they do math. And that means poetry, right? I never thought 30 years into my career that poetry would be as despised as it is. It's hard. Because, I know a lot of kids who took calculus and failed at it. I know a lot of kids who took calculus when they weren't ready, but they never cursed calculus. They knew it was important, right? And they had known that if they had gotten through calculus, that's a big deal. But when it comes to language, how they think and frame the world, how they communicate, with all due respect, much more important than calculus for the average 95% of kids who are not going to be scientists and mathematicians at that high level. To see where we are with this. So I was teaching 13 plays, play a week. I didn't have to teach them history, besides grammar. Shakespeare was a great Christian writer. I didn't have to explain who Jesus was. That's perhaps the most stunning thing to me. When I started teaching at Purdue University, where I got my PhD in the early 1990s, I got a lot of kids that reminded me of the kids here in Oshkosh. A lot of first-generation kids going to college. A lot of kids came from farms and places where they didn't have a lot of broad experience with life. And they would come to my class in 1992 when I started teaching at Purdue as a graduate student. And they'd come to my classes and they didn't know a whole lot. Education was better than it is now, but they still didn't know anything. But they understood the basic arc of American history. They had a vague understanding of when the Romans came versus the medieval people, and they knew when the Civil War was. They had a sense that they could differentiate between World War I and Vietnam, which they can't do anymore. But most alarmingly, but most comforting, they understood the arc of the Bible. Whether they believed in it or not, whether they were raised with it or not, they had a basic civilizational understanding of how we got to where we are. And the most damaging thing that modern progressive education done is to take that from them. One of the first things, and I know you know this from Moms for Liberty, when they created the new language arts scheduling for Common Core, they got rid of almost all fiction, but they got rid of every bit of poetry, because not every kid's going to get there. In fact, most kids won't. And it's not fair to the kids who can't do it. That's why they got rid of many public schools. Public schools have gotten rid of calculus in high school. Even if you've got kids who can do it, it's not fair to let them do it. And that's the ideological pull behind all of this. And I've looked over all of this thinking about this over the last 15 years. What's happening now, that's all the politics. The danger now is that those kids at Indiana 30 years ago, if you gave them to me for a semester and I put good books in front of them, I could wake them up. I could get them interested. I mean, this is an interesting thing for me. For my first 15 years as a teacher, I won 11 teaching awards at 6 different universities. And if you look at my student evaluations, kids 19 out of 20, very happy. Even the kids who didn't like the books. I look at now, so suddenly in the last 5 years, I've become a really bad teacher, according to the kids. There's a site out there, it's called Rate My Professor. I don't put a lot of stock in it because it's not curated. I could write letters about myself. I could make up a face and fall. In fact, I had colleagues down the years who did that. I had one colleague when I was teaching in Tennessee, he spent hours a day making up fake bios for himself, a little praise to balance out his program. So to say that that's a serious site, I don't. But even in the evaluations I get from my kids now, it's very different. I haven't changed much, but man, have they changed. They don't want it. And what's different between now and those freshmen in Indiana 30 years ago is the technology. And I'll say this, I spend way too much time on this myself, so I'm guilty as well. And the more I'm on this, when I put this down and pick up a book, it takes me time to remember how to read a book. And I was in my 40s before I had one of these things. And my whole career, my whole life has been reading. And every day I spend on this, I'm reading books less. And when I pick up books, it's like I've retarded myself a little bit in terms of what I can read. And I see that happening. And so I understand the frustration of these kids. No one's ever taught them to read. And worse than that, nobody's ever explained to them why they should. And so we're going to see some of that as we move forward here. So I think one of the great historical ironies is going to be, based on the track we're on now, we could always alter it, but where we're heading now, in 20 years there aren't going to be any more public school teachers. It's not going to be. It's going to be AI, right? What do your kids and your grandkids, what do they interact with more, you or them? This. Who do they spend more time with? Who are they more intimate with? Who always validates what they want, even if it's bad for them? Who does the math and the writing and the reading so they don't have to do it anymore? And one of the great ironies is if I'm right about this, and I think I'm going to be, why would you want human beings teaching kids? The left have set up a system that the purpose of education is equity, not education. In fact, the more educated a kid is, the more privileged we call that kid, right? The kid who's able to get ahead, he or she's the problem because she makes the other kids look bad. You can't let them reach poetry. You can't let them take calculus, right? That's what the left succeeded in doing. So what's the one way that you could teach every kid in a completely equitable way? Have no teachers, have one AI program for everybody, right? So it's funny to me that I knew the progressives were destroying education, it was obvious. I didn't realize until quite recently that their destruction of education is going to take them down too. It really is going to take them down. And I think, over the next 20, 25 years, as this becomes more rigorously enforced, there will be places like Freedom Project for a smaller and smaller and smaller remnant of people who either get it or remember what it was. We're doing our, this is the last week for our enrollment for fall. And our numbers have gone down the last 3 years about 10 or 20 students fewer, right? We're not growing, we're a little bit. But what's really alarming is that the grades that we're getting, fewer and fewer kids are the elementary school kids. Because the moms now, the young moms, who've had this bad education, they don't even know, they don't read themselves much. They don't have experience with education, meaning academic achievement. It's social. And so I'm not surprised. 15 years when we started ago was very exciting because we were getting mostly little kids. Most moms felt, okay, Johnny's 15, he's in high school, he is who he is, but she's 5, right? And they were looking for alternatives. And now it's the younger families that you're starting, and it's because they don't know. They didn't grow up. Everybody in this room, every single one of you is old enough to remember that you did get something from school, right? You had bad teachers, but you had good ones. I remember growing up in the 70s. And yeah, looking back, it was obvious I was being pushed left. But it was moderate, right? And there were exceptions. There's not much of that anymore in the public schools. So I think the big paradigm shift now is we've got to back off on the politics stuff. I'm not saying stop fighting it, trying to get out of the schools, but there's a bigger problem here. Even if you manage to take the politics out of schools, you have kids who cannot read. They can't. And they do not want to. They do not want to. And I don't know how you fix that, but I do know that if we don't fix it, you can't hold on to a country. You can't. Who is it that's trailing after Mondami and AOC? Who's doing that? The younger people, right? Because they know that they can't do anything for themselves. This does it for them. This can do everything it wants you to do in terms of it'll give you all the information that you can't find and summon up yourself. But it can't feed you, can't give you a house, can't do those things. There's a lot of anger and seething, a lot of people who are coming up the trail here who don't even know that an education is what they need. So I'll show you some of this stuff, and but at the end of my presentation, just like I did in this opening, we're going to shift a little bit away from what are the problems, because I know there are still some of you here, you nodded when I even brought it up. Some of you don't quite know what's going on in the public schools, right? We'll do a little bit of that. But we got to talk about that second big problem, right? And so just start with the obvious. I'm not going, Mike, pass this off for you. You can check this out. I mean, I could give you binders, call me Mitt Romney. I can give binders and binders to you of charts and graphs. That's not going to help us anymore because the kids don't know how to read them, even if we try to get them to pay attention. And I've said this before, and maybe I'm heretical for doing it. Math matters. I can't do it. I'm not good at math. It's people are different, right? Math is too perfect for me. It's not sloppy enough. I took math classes, and I remember diagramming all these different equations, but it always came out to the same thing, 19. 2 times pi, right? There was no getting around it. Beautifully logical. But I chose books and words because I got 30 kids in the class. They read a soliloquy from Shakespeare. They have 30 different interpretations. Not always right, but certainly interesting. And so I chose that. And so I do think you can muddle through without higher math, but you can't muddle through without being able to read. And so the nation's report card, and that's the other thing. I hope you understand this. It doesn't matter what state you're in. Doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. It is not a Wisconsin problem, or a Michigan, or a New York, or a Massachusetts, or a California. I've learned one thing. I've taught at 7 different universities all across the country. The same people are doing this in the reddest states and the bluest. So the nation's report card. So when we talk about national trends, you've got local information here. You're going to find that nationally, it's the same. There is no one state that you can point to and says, send your kids to that state, move to that state. No, it's not going to work. The nation's report card, the best metric we have, shows continued declines in reading for U.S. students, compounding the crash in the nation's reading scores. In 2024, average reading scores on the nation's report card declined by 2 more points for both 4th graders and 8th graders, 2 points. Those 2 grades are specifically studied. Grade students compared to 2022. This steepens on top of a 3-point decline seen in both those grades since 2022 and 2019. There's not a single state in the union, not one, who seriously raised their reading abilities. We also learned, just this 2024, the results show that fewer than a third, about 29% of students nationwide are working at the NAEP proficient level in reading and at both grades. Scoring at the NAEP proficient level means, this is what it means for readers. You are doing the minimum. If you can consistently understand written writing and interpret its meaning. This is not asking kids to read Shakespeare. It is, can you read a paragraph and tell your teacher what it's about? And about 70% of our kids, depending upon the state, a little less and a little more, they can't. I see at the university. These are freshmen in college. They can't read 5 pages of text. They're used to reading fragments of sentences. They're used to reading a text. And they scan that. It's not like they're actually dissecting the text. They glance at it, right? So when you ask a kid, this is most of my kids in college, to read a chapter of a book, let alone a book, they cannot do it. They can't follow the narrative because they've never had the constant ability. You don't get to calculus 14 grades before calculus. You got to do all of them. You got to understand them so you can do the 15th. No one's done the kind of reading they need for this. Another one of my anecdotes, last semester, a couple of years ago, I pointed out I had the very first group of kids that had never read a book. Now, the last semester that ended in May, I had 4 classes. In 4 classes, that was about 120 kids. I had 3 kids out of 120 who've ever read a book.
Ever read a book?
A book, yep.
You mean it's an entirety, right?
Yeah.
Cover.
Oh, yeah. So I mean,
Does it read extras?
Yes, yeah, sure. What did Common Core do? It took Romeo and Juliet, and they picked 2 soliloquies out of it, 18 lines, and told the kids what the story was about, and had them read the 14 lines, completely divorced of context, right? Which I'm sure meant that they understood it even less without the context. And so what we're talking about here is functional illiteracy. 4th graders scoring below the NAEP basic likely cannot recognize a reason for a character's action implied in a story. They can't. Less than 2/3 of 8th graders nationwide are failing to hit the basic benchmark in reading. And I just told you what that basic benchmark is. Can you tell me what you read? And they can't do that. K-12 public education. We've college professors who, and that's the funny thing. Where did the progressives come from who destroyed public education? From the universities. Departments of education, creating this increasingly garbage socialist pedagogy for now 50 years. They did it. They tricked out teachers. They are the ones. At UW Oshkosh a couple of years ago, the education department actually petitioned the university so that education majors would never have to study reading, writing, or math or science. Yeah. They wanted all the education majors they could get, but they wanted to withhold them from taking any subject areas because education is a entity in itself. In fact, math and science and reading, that gets in the way of your ideology, right? And if we send our education majors to math, because that's what it used to be. When I first started teaching, the education department sent the kids to me, teach them how to write. They sent them to math teachers to learn math, and scientists to learn chemistry. No. They want to do it. And they want to do it because they won't do it. 3 years ago when they petitioned the university, it was a one-person vote that stopped it from happening. One vote. Hasn't come back again because the university was $18 million in debt, and they were too busy firing everybody to get around it. But about 40%, almost 40% of education departments across the country no longer teach subjects to kids, people who want to be teachers. That's how bad it's getting quick. Pure ideology, right? So the professors who unleashed this are now having to deal with it, like I mentioned at the beginning of the talk, right? I have a lot of very progressive professors who don't like the fact that the kids that come to college can't take their classes, can't do their homework, can't read books, can't do the math. As we see with the Democrat Party across the country, as they try to figure out how they did this to themselves, they can't do it, right? When you look at the Democrats, the progressives nationwide politically, they don't believe it was their fault. They've convinced themselves, right, that their own lying eyes aren't right. So what do? They double down on the wrong things, right? The things that destroyed their political future anyway. That's what you have here. These professors, K-12 public education fails, according to, this is a consortium of professors. Education fails to prepare students for writing at the college level. For example, Suffolk, the community colleges, Professor Nicholas Giordano says, this is a shameful indictment of the K-12 public education system where the overwhelming majority of students are not performing at college level. With all due respect, Mr. Giordano, who taught those teachers that didn't teach your kids? You did. We did. He also noted a contrast between a decrease in academic performance and the rise in grade point averages. That's exactly right. It's almost impossible to get a C at a university anymore. Well, look at Harvard, right? We've seen with the riots and all the anti-Semitism, right? We figured out this is supposed to be an elite college. What I hear from these Harvard people on the streets talking about history, talking about sociology, I think my kids are better educated. Not much, but that's Harvard University, right? Has nothing to do with academic excellence. It's who do you know? Who was your daddy, right? What connections do you have? Somebody once pointed out recently to me, and it's exactly right. He said he was a former vice president of an Ivy. He said, you don't go to the Ivy League to become smart. You go to the Ivy League to be connected. That's why you go. The network, right? He also noted a contrast between a decrease in academic performance and the rise of grade point averages, calling it simply more evidence that the standards are being routinely lowered to cycle students through and create the illusion of success. Isn't that social justice? Isn't that equity? People who can't do must be treated like people who do. In fact, the people who can't do are actually better than the people can do. Why are they coming after Sydney Sweeney? I mean, what did she do? She was born pretty. But you can't do that. Because how many of the rest of us can't be pretty, right? So you got to destroy her, right? I mean, now you've got people. One of the interesting things about the Sydney Sweeney thing is for the last 15 years, haven't we been seeing all of our models be plus size, right? Put me in a bra and panties. That's what they were doing for 15 years in the name of equity, right? And one company decides, you know what? Let's be novel. Let's take a pretty girl, right? And put blue jeans on her. And they lost their minds. It's equity, right? The illusion of success. According to a study from the College Board, businesses are spending yearly $3.1 billion to teach remedial writing for their employees. It's another reason, right? Why go to college when you can go right to a job and they'll teach you the reading you need, right? Now, you know what the businesses are going to do? They're going to teach them remedial reading so they can get through these menial tasks. They're not going to teach them how to read Shakespeare on business time, I can tell you that. But the big businesses know that the schools are not going to give them the right kinds of kids who can do basic reading. Math. According to a new report, this was a couple weeks ago, by the Center of Reinventing Public Education, a research group at Arizona State University, math achievement in public schools since 2020 is cratering. In spring of 2024, just 30% of American fourth graders were performing on grade level in math, down 69% since 2019. And what does that mean? You'll know also, you know that Common Core took serious literature and poetry out. Well, under Common Core, under no circumstances were you supposed to memorize your multiplication tables. How do you become a great mathematician or even a competent one? How do you become an engineer? You have imbibed math, its principles, its functions. And that had to be up here. Can't do it with a t-square. They got rid of that because not everybody could do it. Math professors who sat by while math people destroyed math. And you get this, many universities, including places like George Mason and Temple, are shocked. I tell you, shocked. Reminds me of, what's the movie? I'm shocked. No, the Casablanca, right? I'm shocked. There's drinking going on in this establishment. It's exactly, how could you be a professor and be blind to this? University professors are shocked to find engineering and pre-med students struggling with introductory algebra. I mean, doctors and engineers who cannot process basic math and basic chemistry. You've all seen the places like UCLA where, or even the, what's the one in Minnesota, the Mayo Clinic, right? All these teaching colleges for medicine are becoming very low. Why? Because they can't get the first year residents can't do the math and the science. So what do you do with them? I mean, the system was designed to keep them from achieving. So what have we taken out of our law schools and our medical schools? Well, medicine and law. And we're replacing it with what? The same predictable social justice advocacy, right? Students are placed at these schools. They are placed in pre-college math, middle school and high school math, in hopes that someday they may catch up. Maria Emelianenko, chair of math at GMU, says this is a huge issue. We're talking about college level pre-calculus and students cannot even add 1/2 and 1/3. I could do that. Tells you how remedial this is. I could do that. Math professor Jessica Babcock at Temple said that many of her students could not do rudimentary algebra. An intro quiz, which she described as easy, asked them to calculate simple problems like -6 minus 8. I could do that one too. She found that no two papers had the same answer, and not one of them was correct. Ladies and gentlemen, your future engineers, because you know those kids will get their degrees, right? They will get their degree. I tell my kids at the university, if you pay a university enough money, it will give you any degree you want. You don't have to be even talented. And this one always gets me. This is what they've done to math. Math is a pyramid now, right? Look at what the base, the foundation of math is. Very bottom, Eurocentric math. The purpose of math is racism. If you're taught that, why would you need numbers? At the very bottom, at the very foundation of the pyramid, is Eurocentric math. And when we say Eurocentric, we mean math where there is such a thing as right answers. Notice at the bottom, Eurocentric math is racist. People who say, I don't see color in my mathematics. So, lo and behold, if you do math, add, subtract, multiply, and all those other things I don't know anything about, if you see that if you don't see color and race when you do that, well, that's the white supremacy in this. You must realize, right? Math is beautiful beyond me because it's perfect. It always comes out the same way. And you can build and fly airplanes and go to the moon because of the genius of math. And they're telling you that's the thing about math that is most racist. And that's what you're teaching your kids. And then notice the final one at the bottom of the pyramid. Assuming that math is neutral. If you assume that math is not racialized, well, then you're part of the white supremacy group, right? This is how they're teaching math now. You go a little higher. This is all right. Notice this is called covert white supremacy. For thousands of years of people doing wonderful things to benefit humanity in the name of math, and you never realized until we came along that you're all just a bunch of racists. How about this? Standard testing, standardized tests. Making kids demonstrate what they know is also racism, so they get rid of those. Special education processes. Teaching special ed kids differently from normal kids is also racism. Kids who struggle or fall behind, you gotta, as George Bush told us, right? Leave nobody behind. The only way you get no kid left behind in education is if you push them all through, right? Deficit thinking. Oh, and look what else is white supremacy. And this goes right back to Common Core. 2 + 2 = 4. If you believe that, you're a racist. If you are so short-minded to insist that 2 + 2 is 4, then you're a bigot. Because I may disagree with you. Your kid may disagree with you. Who are you to insist that there is anything absolute about math? Remember when Common Core told us that 2 + 2 could be 5? That's where that comes from. A little bit further, people who say just stick to math. So if you dare say to your kids, you know what, stop worrying about race and gender and class, and let's just focus on the numbers. Well, that makes you racist too. And then you get above the covert line, and what do you got? What do they call overt white supremacy? Which they say is unacceptable in math. Racist jokes. A lot of white people here. Did you grow up telling racist math jokes? Have you ever heard of racist math jokes? But apparently they see and the N-word, because you know, the N-word it must be, right, bound up in Pythagoras, right? This is what they're telling you. Racist word problems. That, you know what I mean that means? If your word problem starts, Susie and Johnny had 2 apples, you've already engaged in racism because you didn't use the names Shaniqua and Shanaqua, right? That makes you a bigot and a racist. Because that's what they do with math, right? You gotta clean it out. Think about what they did with Sydney Sweeney. What was her problem? She was a pretty white girl. How dare she be who she is? And note at the top, because this is going to come right back to bite them, the apex of math white supremacy is segregated classes. Now, who over the last 15 years has been segregating kids in the name of critical race theory? The left. Of course, as you know, segregation's bad. If you take out of a class, you're a high level math class, and you got 6 kids who can't make it, and you take the kids out, so that's racism. The kids who can't do it must get the same grade as the kids who can do it. But then they turn around, because they always do this, the left, that when they segregate classes, the argument that black kids learn with black teachers, right? I have some evidence of that coming up. You got to understand the philosophy behind it. Now, shifting gates, I've got hours and hours of examples, but let's get to that second part of what I was talking about. This is a great article. It's a number of professors and teachers have came together, write papers about this kind of stuff. This one comes from April of this year. The title of the article is, because this absolutely mirrors my experience, Credentialed but Illiterate. Everybody gets a graduation. Everybody has a diploma. Everybody goes to college, regardless of what entrance tests mean. And by the way, you know now, we're at almost 78% of colleges no longer do entrance exams because that separates kids. You can't justify taking kids who don't belong if they can't pass the test. So what do? You get rid of the test, right? And most universities, over 50%, don't even require the SATs and the ACTs anymore. And by the way, the SATs and the ACTs have dumbed down and ideologized their tests. They're not even, they're tests that gauge sociology, not your achievement levels. And this is the takeaway. Students are, I agree, they're functionally illiterate. They can function, they can read man and woman, or they or them, on the bathroom walls, right? They can, the doors, they can do that. They can scan a text, but they cannot sustain learning through books or chapters, or even in some cases pages. Students are functionally illiterate. They are unable to engage with serious adult literature and often find the very act of reading tedious. As a result, they avoid it whenever possible. First thing I ask my kids every semester in all my writing classes, how many of you are here because the university put a gun to your head and said you have to be there? And I have never had one kid raise their hand and said, nope, I'm here because I want to learn how to write. Never one. They'll tell you, that allows me to bully them the rest of the semester. They gleefully, when I say, I try to come and be friendly. I say, God, let's be honest here. We're all in the same boat. Raise your hand if the only reason here is because the university forced you. And they all raise their hands. And then I for the next entire semester, I throw it right back in their faces. Right? Because it has to be done. You're frustrated. You don't like the grades I'm giving you. I told you I'm suddenly a bad teacher, right? I make them write every day. Every single class, they got to come to class, they got to read something, and they write two full pages of analysis of what they've read. They hate it, hate it. So much so that last semester of my 120 kids, I had to report 48 of them for using AI to do their papers. Those are the ones that I warned once, threatened a second time, and then the third time reported them. At some point, every single one of my kids uses AI to do its work. In fact, what I spend my time doing now, it's not prepping and reading books to get ready for class. I spend all these papers feeding them into AI checkers. That's what I do, right?
Into AI, what was that?
Checkers. There's places on the internet where you could copy the stuff, put it up on and they'll tell you what percentage of that. It's as of right now, it's not a perfect science, but it's obvious. And here's what the other thing I tell the kids: if you're going to use AI, I say to them, do me one favor. Take it and make it worse. Misspell things. Take the AI and mess around and make the grammar incorrect, because the minute you turn into me a paper that doesn't have those mistakes, I know you're probably cheating. And they agree, right? This aversion of reading manifests in predictable ways. They skim texts without comprehension. They fail to identify key arguments. They struggle with exam questions simply because they haven't read things carefully. All this is done in the name of self-esteem, which is another fancy way of equity, right? It's more important for kids to feel like they've done something than to make them do the hard work to do it. In the name of self-esteem, schools are reluctant to challenge students, hold them accountable, or insist upon high standards of excellence. The result is a dangerous turn to what has been called the therapeutic approach to education. Voila, that is your departments of education on college campuses. It's therapy. Your whiteness, your dangerous whiteness, your toxic masculinity, your privileged white suburb experience, all of that has to be treated as if you were mentally ill. You are sick. Capitalism has made you sick. The racist founding of this country has made you sick. The fact that Palestine is not free is your fault, right? And the only way you can fix these problems is if you get therapy from them. Why else would the University of Oshkosh Department of Education want those kids completely divorced? What, we're going to teach math? You just have a math pyramid of racial aggression. Why would you send kids to math teachers? I like that they call what he calls it, the therapeutic approach to education. Students are flattered rather than instructed, and their self-esteem is affirmed regardless of whether they have done anything estimable. The essential work of education, discerning truth. This is why, if you, those of you who love math and think I'm being kind of stupid, you have a much bigger IRA, I'm sure, because you did the right thing. But this is why I think at the end of the day, that language is more important than even math. The essential work of education is teaching kids to discern truth from error, cultivating judgment, introducing the young to the intellectual heritage of their civilization. That is displaced by therapeutic means. Over the past several decades, elementary and secondary schools have increasingly adopted a pedagogical model prioritizing technological fluency. That's what they do now. That's the big shift. They already own the ideology. There are as many school counselors being hired, all of this interventionism for psychosocial, what we call social learning, right? Where do you hear the word social and emotional learning? Where do you hear the word math and science and those things, or reading? That's what they do. That's the therapy. Social emotional learning. Listen to the word. Social emotional learning is something that your teachers are utterly incapable to do. They're not sociologists, and they know nothing about psychology. They have it should scare every American into shivering to imagine that some young woman with a 4-year degree in elementary reading is going to be able to give your kid psychotherapy. There's your problem right there. It's nothing to do with reading, writing, and math. It's everything. It's not what they're not doing. It's what they are doing instead, right? Children are pushed into technology from kindergarten. Computers, iPads, as earlier as kittens. How many of you got kids or grandkids who, well before they go to school at age 5, are already better on the screen than you are? Can't blame that on public schools, can you? The idea that, of course the public schools start them right away at 5 years old. Of course they do. But they're already there, right? They're already there. Children are pushed into technology, home, before they get to school, as early as kindergarten, and are not required to read entire books, let alone write things about them. You know, the thing about a book was remarkable when we were younger, right? You got a book. I think this is a universal situation, right? You were assigned to read a book. You did not want to read it. You were grounded until you did. And be damned if you didn't like it, right? Now, you actually gave time to take you finally did it. That happened to me in 2nd grade. It's just a magical thing. Kids don't do it. They're not allowed to do it. They're able to do it. To be literate in the way that I'm talking about is to participate in the great conversations of civilization. It is to gain access to and be initiated into the shared understandings of a community. Education, properly understood, is neither vocational training or self-esteem projects. And this bugs me. The Republican answer to the problem of education is more vocational tracks. I'd rather have my kid in a vocational track than a public school. But it doesn't fix the problem. I've said this before. What galls me is when the right and Republicans say, here's how we're going to fix it. We are going to offer school choice. It enrages me. The only people in this state who could regulate public school is the legislature. When they tell you we're going to ignore all those kids suffering in the public schools, that's our job. And we're going to give you options for something else. You are deranged in what your job is. Why are you carving out alternatives to the one thing you should oversee? How many states in this union who have Republican governance at the state level, including yours, as they did again this year, more money to the schools every year as achievement goes down? The only way you can do something about that is take your kids out. It's only you can do, but the legislature couldn't. I get it. You got Democrat governor. I get it. But when you tell me, as a protector of our kids in a legislature, that here's what we're going to do. We're going to ignore the problems in the public schools. In fact, we're going to reward them with your tax money at greater and greater levels, while we might consider giving you a little bit of that money back after you pay your taxes to go to another private school. It is education properly understood is neither vocational training. I want my vocational kids to be able to read. Absolutely. Education properly understood is neither vocational training nor a self-esteem project. It is a moral and intellectual discipline that presupposes a conception of the good and an account of the human person as more than a bundle of appetites or a mere consumer. It sees the human being as a moral agent. Now we're getting, see how quickly you get to God? Yeah. Getting rid of God this couldn't happen. Getting rid of God had to happen here. An account of the human person as more than a bundle of appetites or mere consumer. It sees the human being as a moral agent capable of self-transcendence and shaping a life toward truth, beauty, and meaning. The second article just about it sums it up. Most of our students are functionally illiterate. Most of our young people. Do you know that almost 50% of Americans, over the whole country, about 51% of Americans read at a 6th grade level or lower? That's more than half the country. Most of our students are functionally illiterate. Our average graduate literally could not read a serious adult novel cover to cover and understand what they have read. They just can't do it. They don't have the desire to try. They don't possess the vocabulary to grasp what they read, and most certainly not the attention spans to finish a book. And on top of everything else, it's just boring to them. No pictures, no video games, no any of that stuff. So what does the state of Wisconsin do? And this is something that you would like to see the legislature, somebody, what did they do, the DPI?
Give them more money.
But what did the DPI do? Yeah, they changed the standards. They just completely, they're bragging now, the DPI, that the success is going up in the public schools. No. You just redefined the problem. Look, in Wisconsin, 2020-23, only 37, it's lower now, only 37% of third graders were proficient in reading. 61% of third graders statewide were able to read only at a basic level. To fix the problem, a couple of years ago, what did the DPI do? The DPI simply orders changes so that no child's abilities would be below basic. If you can't read anything, that's basic. If you are functionally able to read, that's baseline. You're not going to qualify for honors, well, they got rid of most of the honor programs anyway, but that is baseline. That no child's abilities would be below basic, or even basic any longer. Now children will be described as failing kids, illiterate kids. They are developing kids, right? Well, they haven't reached their position yet. They're still growing, right? We don't have to do anything. Just give them more time, right? And keep promoting them. Now children in Wisconsin are described as developing rather than below basic. So basic means you can't really read. Below that is what? You're developing. Basic becomes approaching. Proficient becomes meeting standards. The words no longer describe ability. They imply progress for students who are not progressing at all. The DPI says that the old judgmental terms are outdated, like merit, achievement, mastery of subject. Oh, that's judgy and bigotry. Every kid is progressing, right? The DPI says the old judgy terms are outdated and that the new nomenclature improves feelings of encouragement and motivation among students, right? Don't work, don't try, don't care, don't know. That's just a choice. As good as anything else that somebody chooses. By the way, as 2 years ago, we were paying $18,882 for every single student in the state. It's over $20,000 now a year. Now. And with every raise that goes up, right? All the more money we commit to the school, everything keeps going lower and lower and lower. There's no force right now that's doing anything about this. And you know about Donald Trump. God bless him, he's doing what he can. He's got to get Congress to get rid of the Department of Education. Do you right now, when you look at our Congress, do you think they will? We'll see, I hope so. Because if that doesn't happen, then the next time you have, he could fire everybody in the building except for Linda McMahon. Let her do it by herself. That's fine. What happens when the Democrats take over? They build it with a vengeance. That's what they'll do. You think they're going to bring back the 5,000 who were fired? No. They're going to hire 10,000. Something has to give here. Outside of that, there's nothing going on in the states, really, to move this in terms of legislatures. Remember I said that the left said math was bad because you have to segregate kids who can. Well, here they go. From about a year ago, the Wall Street Journal reports that almost 200 Black and Latino students have signed up for so-called affinity classes where no white kids are allowed. White teachers are also barred from the program. School leaders claim that non-white students feel more comfortable without white people around. Lawyers for Evanston Township High School in Illinois claim that the white-free classes are optional. Wait, you can't be a white teacher and you can't be a white kid, but they're optional, which means that black kids can choose to have only black teachers. So they don't violate racial discrimination laws. Ironically, white students are a minority in the school district, representing only 44% of the kids. The school board falsely insists that racism is the, quote, most devastating factor contributing to diminished achievement of students. So in other words, why are Black and Hispanic kids lower in math and science? Because of racism, right? Similar programs have been tried in Minnesota, California, Washington. Officials declined repeated requests for comment and even threatened to shut down a public meeting when a journal reporter showed up to ask questions. I know you've probably seen this short video. UNESCO, the United Nations, this is a global thing. Did you see in the news about a week and a half ago? Randy Weingarten, the leader of the second biggest teachers union in the whole country, came out and let people know that they were partnering with the UN to create a global curriculum so that every kid in the world will get this kind of education. And I've already mentioned, and I know you've seen this before, social emotional learning. That's what Common Core morphed into. Don't even use the word Common Core. They'll look at you a squint and say it's dead. It's all become social emotional learning, right? And the video I show is a short one. This one is direct from the United Nations about what education is going to look like. Let's take a look. How are we going to educate for the future, the 21st century? Get rid of that C-. How dare you? It's all racist. Throw the test away because it's meaningless. And guess what we're going to do? Gandhi neurons. Okay. How about, instead of learning things, how about teaching kids empathy? How about that? Instead of reading and writing, how about we teach them compassion? Right? How about that? Let's use technology to make it fun and immersive and collaborative and relevant to a world where nobody knows anything. I'm going to go back here. Notice what they did. Those bastards at the United Nations. Blinded by faith is turned upside down. All you troglodytes who think that the world is something more than a clashing atoms. They've got the book upside down, and the smart people are doing critical inquiry, like throwing their tests away and learning empathy and that kind of stuff. And there's your globalism. Say what? Changing mindsets, challenging norms, championing innovation. Do you see reading and writing and all of that? And you got to give it to the UN. They will tell you, they will give you this video, and shamelessly, right? How many people do you think there are in this country alone who think that this is compassionate education? A country where everybody gets to go to college free and everybody gets a diploma. What 60, 70% maybe of the country thinks that's probably true? In the name of what, equity? We're just about done here, a couple more things. And along with this goes with you, something I'm certainly aware of, is it's in this era of equity that they've decided that they really are the moms and dads you aren't, right? That the ethos now, it's why they so hate homeschooling. What are they trying to do right now? Places like Harvard come up with regulations to stop homeschooling. Massachusetts, I think it was? They planned, or New Jersey wants to pass a law that would require homeschool moms to have a education degree from a university to be allowed to homeschool. Send them to the places where they don't learn any math and science, nothing homeschooling, they just get the sociology, right? So law professor, this is one of many of these, James Dwyer of William and Mary, debunks the idea that parents have any rights when it comes to their kids. The reason that the parent-child relationship exists is because the state allows it. You have kids because the big all-power state allows you to create life. But because the state allows you to do it, the kids belong to them. The reason that the parent-child relationship exists is because the state confers legal parenthood on people through its paternity and maternity law. Did you know that? That you are allowed to have kids because the state has, do they have those things? Conception laws? I don't know. And in the Journal of Ethics of all things and Social Philosophy, Professor Connor Kianpour insists that biological parents have, quote, no rights, and he demands that government take over all aspects of parenting. Back to the universities again, right? Here's what he writes. Individuals have no right to rear their biological children, nor do they have any interests weighty enough to justify a right to rear children generally. Since these rights do not exist, regulated parenting policies cannot be said to jeopardize parent rights, because you have none. Certain individuals, he said, are unfit to rear children. Do you think that would be probably most conservatives, according to this guy? Certain individuals are unfit to rear children because they are objectionably. Tell me what the facts are. See, in this brave new world, you don't need facts and empirical evidence. You just need to say it loudly from the left. Certain individuals are unfit to rear children because they are objectionably intolerant of certain backgrounds and ways of life. Translation. You don't want to give your 8-year-old daughter puberty blockers? You are objectionably unable to have kids. And I'll close with this. Little Wisconsin home cooking. Big education jumble, teachers unions a couple weeks ago talking about the future and what they want to do. Just play a little bit of this.
I'm Tina. I'm from Madison, Wisconsin.
There she is.
Lifetime
here.
member of the Teaching Assistants Association, which is an AFT. I'm also a lead steward in the Madison Teachers Incorporated, because I left higher education and work in a high school now. So everyone who raised your hand and said that you got radicalized in college, imagine if you got radicalized 4 years earlier.
That's it. That's the point, right? Imagine all of you people who became radicalized in college. Think about what happened if we were able to give that education to lower age kids. That's what Common Core did do. That's what social and emotional learning does do. I can go on, I'll play a little bit more of this, and you can listen how just outrageous this stuff is.
Okay. There's a dialectic between these organizations, but there are some major differences. High schools are a cross-section of our community. So when we look around higher ed and we're like, why is everyone so white and rich here? Look at the public schools. Now, people do a lot of research on what's going wrong in public schools? Why are children struggling to read? why are there these dropout rates? And they all say, well, not all, but a lot of people point to teacher preparation programs, which is in part a backhanded way to challenge teachers' unions, right? And
See what she's saying here? Like I did here, let's blame what we teach the teachers, because the teachers then take what they learn and they go in the classroom. And that, of course, is white privilege too, right? And that's just a way to just criticize we teachers union. I swear, when do you ever hear the unions talk about kids as just numbers that generate revenue? That's how they go about it.
I do want to say, there is no organization that does more to improve the conditions of the lives of children than teachers' unions.
No force in this world, including your churches and your own homes, does more for kids than the teachers' unions.
And I have 3 minutes. So we need to train high schoolers how to organize. High school teachers, our hands are really tied. They're banning books, they're cutting funding, and we all, like, if you have children.
Where are they cutting funding? Where? What books are they banning? They didn't ban any books. All those nasty porn books in elementary schools, they're in the middle schools and the high schools. They just got them away from the little kids. What books have they banned? None. Zero. Zip.
In school and they're in a club, that teacher is not paid for that time, whoever is advising them. They're going in on their lunches. Y'all know, it's a lot. Okay, we help children. The next thing. Basically, I used to, when I was a graduate student organizer, I was always saying we need to organize undergraduates to join in this struggle because we're students and workers. And now I just want to say, because I think a lot of people here are in higher ed, like, work with the high schools, connect with the teachers unions, connect with your kids' teachers. Give them, I'm gonna be honest, give us money, like on Teacher Appreciation Days.
Give us money, right? So, my final thought, Matt, perhaps went a little too long today, but my final thought is that all this politics is suddenly lurching a little bit lower than what's going on with the technology. This technology could be a wonderful opportunity for kids, if used correctly, to give them an education that gets around the politics. The way we're doing this now, not. And AI is quite dangerous. Because here's the other thing, as I'm doing my AI checks, there are other people who are creating AI writing for kids that can't be detected. When you've got these places that are checking, they're already fine and they're getting paid a lot of money to create AI papers for your kids' classes that can't be caught, right? And I believe that. I think probably, I said this, I think at one point, almost every single kid I have is doing it. The ones who aren't smart enough to cover their tracks are the ones that get caught. The other ones know how to do it, right? So, I guess the politics doesn't really matter. If you can't read, write, think for yourself, if you can't get a job and support a family, if you're 40 years old living in your mom's basement because you don't have any skills, do the politics matter anymore? So what I see coming down, and one nice thing about this is that there'll be less of the teachers' unions when AI takes over. Why do you need them, right? They will suffer. They'll experience what they've made the rest of us experience. But on the dystopian other side of that, when there's one education voice speaking to every kid in every public school, getting the same, that now you've entered the, I would say you've entered the world of George Orwell's 1984, but none of my kids know what that is. Thanks.
Very powerful. So the program ends at 8. However, we'll carry this over for